The Florida Podcast Network, the voice of Florida.
From Mallory Square in Key West to the Governor's Mansion in Tallahassee and all points beyond, you're listening to the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com, your source for all things related to the craft beer community in the Sunshine State. And now your host, Dave Butler.
It is episode 74 of the Florida Beer Podcast, powered by FloridaBeerBlog.com. Dave, your host and author, and we've got one guest on today's show, but it's going to be a lot of different topics, so get ready. Before we do, make sure that you are getting ready by following us on social media at FloridaBeerBlog.com, Florida Beer Blog on Instagram and Twitter. We are FL Beer Blog on Facebook. And please like and subscribe to us on the podcasting app of your choice. We are also a proud member of the Florida Podcast Network, and I wish I could tell you the awesome news that I have coming for the Florida Podcast Network, but I just can't just yet. But I will guarantee you that sooner or later, alligators will be involved with this new show. You can follow us at FloridaPodcastNetwork.com. Our sister page is obviously FloridaBeerPodcast.com, or find us on FP and Insiders on Facebook. On to today's show, we're going to be speaking with Todd Space. May not be a name that you know of, but you're going to start learning it here in a little bit. He is a big name in Miami craft beer as the founder of the Master Brewer Academy, which is a private certificate program that teaches new people that are interested in the art of brewing professionally all the ins and outs that they need to know. He took his past as a science teacher, both domestically and abroad, and uses a lot of that information and curriculum creation know-how to create a very large, comprehensive brewing curriculum that takes place in and works with some of the best craft breweries here in Miami. He is also now the brewmaster at Est33, which is a new Thai fusion restaurant in Brickell City Centre. They are part of the Singha family, and if you know anything about that famous Thai brand of beer, you know the tiger or lion, whatever kind of big cat thing they have on their logo. They have brought a brand new restaurant to Brickell in January. He is heading up the brew system for all the beers they have on tap. And as part of this, they are also going to be a part of the inaugural Miami Beer Week, which is happening in conjunction with Oktoberfest at the end of September. We're going to be talking with Todd about all of that. It's a big episode, so sit back, relax, and enjoy. It's interesting that you have the science background. You were a science teacher for many, many years. Which part of your background got you more interested in drinking beer? The science or having to be a teacher in high school?
Good question. They all influenced it on various levels and various degrees. No, when I first graduated from college, I actually have a degree in science education. So I went to college to become a science teacher, believe it or not. I'm one of the few people who does what they went to college to become. Or did anyway. When I finished college, I moved to Boulder, Colorado, and I found a homebrew store in my neighborhood. So before I got my first job, I started homebrewing. So I was kind of doing both at the same time. I was getting into brewing while I was getting into science teaching at the same time. Just kind of exploring that, and I was just doing it for fun. I wasn't trying to make better beer. I wasn't unimpressed with the beers I was drinking. I just thought it would be a fun science experiment / way to just have two cases of. I was always making brown ales. That was my thing back in the day. So it was like just a good excuse to have two good brown ales in my house for my friends and I, and basically a hobby. And then as a science teacher, when I got into that, of course, it's that interesting concept where I teach about what's called cellular respiration, which is what breathing on the cellular level. And that literally is what yeast are doing inside the tanks. And so when I'm teaching about it, I learned more of the biochemistry behind it, which then inspired my brewing a little bit more. And then more of the brewing got me inspired more of the teaching. And for every time that unit would come up, my students and I would make root beer. And
really?
it was so much fun because, as we know, when you're learning anything scientific, it's really tedious and annoying when you're 16 years old and you're some guy with a beard is trying to tell you how exciting it is. And then you make root beer, and then it is maybe a little bit exciting. And then
I've always wondered, with the act of making beer, obviously you can't talk about alcohol in the middle of a high school class, but
sure.
Is there a lot of science that can be learned just by studying the process of brewing?
Yeah, absolutely, because it is just strictly metabolism and respiration, or just the way that the cells can take in and utilize energy, catabolism, metabolism, and anabolism all at the same time. But it was kind of fun to go through that and get to that next level. And I would always tell my students, when they turn 21, I would teach them the secret step to make it alcoholic, to get them a little bit more inspired. And then surprisingly, I went and taught in Germany for 5 years, still high school biology. I was teaching at a German-American school set up by John F. Kennedy in the 60s. And we were, at 16, you could drink beer in Germany. So we were making beer with my 16-year-olds in Germany. And that was kind of cool. So we took it to the level that I technically had always wanted to. And that was an extra level of enjoyment on that.
That's kind of amazing. And so obviously you came back to Miami, you taught for a number of years, and then you established, and I've seen them around, the Master Brewer Academy. First of all, describe the Master Brewer Academy, and then kind of walk us through what is the point where you decide to finally leave the high school classroom talking about general sciences and enter, I guess, the professional classroom talking about a very specific form of science in an industry that is exploding.
Yeah, actually, David, the origin story is a little bit better, so let me go that route. So I was teaching, as you mentioned, teaching down here in Miami. I was at Miami Central and North Miami Senior for spanning about 6 years between the two. And it's kind of a long story, but, I was looking at, the retirement plans and, what kinds of things I wanted to do in the teaching community and the kinds of things I was doing. And my wife was like, you're really into craft beer. You should do a little, kind of a sabbatical and just be a craft brewer for a minute. And I'm an educated guy and I appreciate the sciences. So I was looking into educational programs for this. And, they're in California and they're in Chicago. There's some amazing programs through the UC system in California, Siebel Institute of Brewing. And Chicago was amazing. And I was like, I can't live in Chicago for a year, and on a teacher's salary and try to, you know what I mean? I was trying to figure all this stuff out. And then I thought to myself, what have I been doing for this past 16 years? I've been designing science curriculum. And what if I just design science curriculum around the education of brewing? If there's not a school within, an easy drive of or anywhere in the Southeast for that matter, I believe at the time Knoxville had a small program that they were running, which would have been literally the closest place to us. And I was like, well, let me just explore. So I went over to Wynwood, and this is, Wynwood was very young at the time. And I met up with the head brewer, Nick Mabane, over there. And I just asked him one simple question. Nick, if someone went through a program and I kind of outlined him what it would look like, would you hire them? And he said yes. So that was my immediate launching point. I figured if someone can get this kind of quote unquote book learning on the science of brewing, and then they can get that entry level foot in the door into the brewery, then it's kind of win-win for everybody. Win for the student, win for the academy. And then of course the breweries are now going to have locally trained people, because as we know, Miami is not necessarily a craft brew mecca. At least it definitely wasn't in 2012 and 13 and 14, when my brain was kind of formulating all this stuff. So I sat for a year and I picked through all the curriculum of all the different programs I could find. There's a program in the UK called the Institute of Brewing and Distilling that they have the only really recognized exam for a general certificate and all the way up through a master's certificate in brewing. So I kind of just, I meshed all the different standards together, and then I created, like I said, I have kind of a lot of practice and a lot of skill in curriculum design. So I just designed an 11-month nights and weekends professional brewer training program at the craft level. And here we are 5 years later, and it's amazing. All the people I've had a chance to work with and educate along the way.
Yeah, it's kind of awesome looking at the collaborators. It's sort of a who's who of people down here in South Florida, especially Matt Manthe, at the top.
Yep.
You've got just John Wakefield and so on and so forth. The early years, because you mentioned it, it's very true, and it's a conversation I've had multiple times, is that Miami and Miami-Dade County, while nowadays here in 2021, obviously, it's getting a lot of notoriety for some really excellent beer and some breweries, it's still not considered a beer area. It's still not the traditional stereotypical drink of choice. So even back in the earliest days of the Master Brewer Academy, how difficult was it to get the word out? How difficult was it to drum up support and interest for people? Was it a lot of legwork on your end, or was the industry starting to get the pull and the interest that it is right now?
A little bit of both. It's a very, very niche community. I mean, the people down here in the craft beer are into it, and there's no doubt about it. You know, when you go to the tap rooms at, Invasive Species is packed, Gulfstream packed. You go to these, small craft breweries that are kind of like neighborhood breweries, and the people who go there are filling them up. So the people who love it. And we're a gigantic city. I consider like all the way, the Tri-County area, if you want to think of it that way. I mean, if you put all that together, we're 5 million people. So a fraction of that, even the small fraction that Miami supports of the craft beer, is still plenty of human bodies that like what we're doing. You know what I mean? And so that makes it kind of nice, but it was a lot of legwork. And mainly what it was going to each brewery and each tap room and meeting the production staff and saying, hey, this is the way MBA works. And just as a little preview, we do all of our classes in the breweries, and we have the local brewer or owner or seller person, whatever the topic is that we're there for. They're the ones who teach that particular topic. So I give them the kind of scope, they do the breakdown, and then I just kind of, glue it all together and make sure it's cohesive. And, the production staff has been super supportive. And then we go to the tap room and we tell everybody there, hey, if someone is drinking a beer with you and they're curious about beer, mention MBA, And within that network, it's been surprising how much it's probably even marketing and word of mouth that I'm able to get student support. So it's been kind of an interesting concept of, someone will be drinking a beer. And here's a small little true story. Maria from Wakefield, she was hanging out with one of her friends. And then a friend of the family, hey, I was curious how you get into this industry. And she's like, hey, you should call Todd. And then he signed up, and he's right now he's actually establishing a brewery in Costa Rica right now as we speak. Good luck.
Oh, wow.
So, it's one of those things of just like this kind of word of mouth and networking, because the community of what we're doing is pretty small. So you're going to end up meeting people who do that. So it's made it, I don't want to say easy, definitely not easy, because it's definitely not easy to get those people. However, if you're seeking out some kind of education, formal education in brewing, if you don't come across MBA, you haven't really tried very hard at all,
Yeah, I was going to say, and then obviously nowadays, especially with the breweries, not just the big players that I know you've been working with, but even some of the up and comers, are they starting to talk to you about not only collaborating with your students and hosting sessions, but also start looking at your graduates for potential hires into their organizations?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, a really cool piece of this is if you're interested in getting that job, really within the first 2 or 3 months of committing to MBA, you're going to be in a brewery. I can't guarantee anything, of course, but the brewers around here, they know what we do. They know the level of intensity that we do it at. They know the level of detail that we go into. And so when they see that someone's going to pay program, typically like the main program that I do, the full program that covers the 11 months, that runs, let's just say approximately $7,000. So if you're a brewery and you know that you've just met somebody who's been working with me for a month or two, they're put $7,000 of investment of money and time into their passion, their career, their love of craft beer, then it gives you an immediate incentive to hire someone like that, because you know that they're interested, they're curious, and they want to learn. Because you can get into brewing, this is definitely an OJT style career. You don't have to be formally trained to become a brewer. It's definitely not a pathway that you need to do. But if you're showing that passion for learning, then of course the brewers are going to say, here's a person who wants to learn, and they're eager to get that extra information, and they're learning it in an organized and structured program, which is going to go through all the bells and whistles. Because, I mean, we spend all our time on safety and cleaning and sanitizing, which is the least exciting and glamorous and luxurious part of brewing, but it's pretty much the most important piece and the piece you have to know the most about. You get to that level of, the brewers know that, and we've been working together for 5 years at least, and they've been working with my students. They get to meet them 4 or 5 times a year. So they kind of know already. They know their personalities, and it's very square peggy where you can say, hey, this is the kind of brewery I want to work at. And then boom, we've got of our current class that we're in right now, 2 of the students already are working in breweries, as a matter of fact.
Nice. That's kind of amazing. Cool. With the students that come in, generally, who are you trying to attract? Are you specifically looking for people that want to move up in the brewery that they're working at? Are they home hobbyists that want to take that extra step and go professional? Are they just people that are interested? Who kind of do you generally get in your classes?
That's an amazing question. So who I get is exactly who you described. Who I'm looking for is evolving every day, because, I have this notion of what I think would be the perfect student, and then I'll get somebody who's not, and they become the perfect, they kind of fit the mold better than I would have predicted. I have no prerequisites is the first thing I'll just tell you right off the bat, because, you can come in completely green. This guy, Pablo, we were just talking about that we met through Wakefield. He came in totally green, never brewed a beer in his life, and he's opening a brewery. And within, I think I'm going to say it was probably by April. So we start in January and we go all the way through November is the program. In April, he had a Schwartz beer that was like, you would never know a home brewer made it. So, he got into it. He was passionate and dove right in. So I want to say, though, that it's kind of a little bit of everything. So I personally would appreciate the most getting students who are currently in the industry already, and they're getting all of their training OJT, and then they can spend a little bit of time in the background with MBA just to get that extra layer of what's going on behind the scenes. Like when you clean a tank, you're just clean a tank and you follow the procedure. Step 1, step 2, step 3, whatever. And you run these chemicals at these concentrations and you just press these buttons and whatever. Then you go through MBA and then you find out why everything's happening and what's really going on behind the scenes in that tank that's getting it ready to receive freshly cooled wort, for example. But that's kind of like my ultimate goal, is to take the people who are already working in the industry and just up level what they do. And that's going to, same thing that I've been saying, is everybody wins, because the brewery is now going to have invested, in their people, and the people have invested in the brewery. And then the quality of that brewery, the beer is going to be even better than it was before, because the person's going to come back, with better skills. And maybe sometimes they might bring back even like something that the brewery wasn't doing and say, hey guys, I learned this in MBA. And then that'll become an SOP at that brewery from that point on. And these things have happened, and I've seen it occur. That is one of my major goals. And then the second one, of course, is just to bring people in who have been brewing for a long time, and they want to start their own brewery, or they want to at least get their foot in the door in the local scene so that eventually they can start their own. And even encourage people who want to be investors or owners who aren't necessarily so concerned about the science of brewing, but by going through the program, they have a better understanding of the entire process. So when they either hire somebody or when they're working with their brewers, they just have a way better understanding of the entire process. So it helps them make better money and spending decisions, because you talk to any brewer down here, and one frustrating thing, or any brewer in the world, one frustrating thing is like, I need this thing. And the owner's like, we don't have it in our budget. And, if the owner understands the brewing process better, they might say, that I understand why that would be an important place to spend my money. You see what I mean? That's one of those things. But the short answer, David, is we love everybody. Get in here, learn how to make craft beer. It's fun. It's rewarding. And it's not glamorous, and it's not going to make you rich. So do it because you love
it. Is there, and I know, speaking to other people in other industries and other educational programs, they usually have a common misconception that the new students come in with, thinking that everything is going to be this way. And literally the first class or two is spent removing that bizarre misconception from their brain so that they can understand what they've really gotten themselves into. With the people that come through the MBA, is there one misconception that everybody seems to bring that you have to take the time to sort of break it down, remove it, and replace it with a good dose of reality?
Not specifically, but curiously, there's something that does happen every single class, and it happens organically, and there's no real drive to make it this way. But a lot of people come in, 70% or more maybe, they'll come in They want to make that double IPA with all of these, with maybe guava or this imperial stout with coffee and cacao nibs and all this stuff. And then within like 2 months, they can't wait to make the perfect Pilsner. The cleanest lager. And it's this, because what we get into, I don't want to say that any beer is easier or more difficult to make, but you definitely cannot hide any flaws in that Pilsner lager. And it just becomes this kind of this passion desire to let the ingredients and the yeast do everything and perfect making that work. Because once you can do that, then you can turn around and you can make all those other beers and everything's just going to be better. Every piece of your quality is going to go higher because you've started off by mastering the kind of simplest, cleanest, maybe even least exciting beers. Although I think we talked earlier about you talking to a bunch of brewers. What does the brewer drink at the end of their shift? They're probably drinking that Pilsner, that light lager, because that's what we tend to love to just kind of just crush on at the end of our day.
Gotcha. And it's funny that you mentioned that, because not only are you doing the Master Brewer Academy, but you are now heading up your own brew house in Brickell at the new S33 restaurant. And what's interesting about that, and I did not realize it, is that it seems to be a partnership or connection with the famous Thai lager beer, Singha.
Yes.
So with the restaurant, I will start by asking, how did the decision to have an in-house brewery come about? You would assume that they would only want Singha or Singha-style beers on tap.
Mm-hmm. So, one thing that I will preface this entire part of the conversation with is, unfortunately, we don't really get to hang out with the guys in Bangkok because since this project has been started, COVID has come around and there's no traveling. So all of my interactions with my Bangkok colleagues are via email, really. So the full story that I want to have when I'm sitting drinking pints of beer with these guys, it will come out when we are able to do that, which is actually coming around the corner. I'm a little bit gray on some of the key and finer points, but the S33 brand is actually a craft brand under the Singha umbrella that already exists in Bangkok. So there are 3, maybe even 4 tap rooms or, establishments that have a small brewery and a restaurant. So a brew pub essentially in Bangkok. And it's, so Boonrod is the name of the brewery that produces Singha. So by definition, that's the umbrella company, organization, let's call it. And then that's the brewery that makes Singha. And then they have, like I said, the smaller brewery called S33 that produces some of the same beers that I do here. And then once we kind of opened and we got the beers flowing, then we were able to open up a few new recipes that we designed here locally in Miami, just for our audience, if you will. And I'm not really sure exactly why, but I guess the main thing that I understand, the way I understand it, is they want to take that S brand and take it international. And Miami's a logical choice because similar climate. So if you're known for your light lagers, this is a great location for light lagers. And Miami's not necessarily. It's definitely real estate here and development here is a huge, but maybe not so much as compared to say a Chicago or LA or New York. So maybe Miami's just a more logical starting place for those 2 reasons. And I'll call this the pilot. And then once we get this place, kind of like, I don't want to say like we're learning the ropes necessarily, but once we get all the fine tunes about having this kind of brewery here, then hopefully we can kind of expand and have a few more of these locations, even worldwide, not necessarily just in the U.S.
That's kind of amazing. Describe the cuisine there, because it seems to be an interesting Thai, Asian barbecue fusion. There's a lot going on with this menu. This
definitely is. It definitely come here going for Thai fusion, not for traditional Thai. The papaya salad is, I'm loving it. It tastes definitely more of the traditional style. The pad Thai is a little bit more, but it has a little bit of an edge to it. But then all of a sudden you can get like Thai fried rice with brisket, because we are also having smoked meats. We have a wood-fired grill. So this is kind of like this American barbecue fusion with Thai / even Asian fusion. There is even like a dish that's famous in China and a dish that's popular in Japan. We have some sake also. We have a full bar, so you can get things like that. So, it's not just Thai and it's not just that one aspect of it, but you can just kind of put it all together. And it's really cool because it's more of a tapas style. So you can get like a beef jerky and a papaya salad and a satay and a pad thai. You know what I mean? You can get like a bunch of things on your table, just kind of ready as you order them.
That's kind of amazing. And then, of course, since you were in charge of the brewery, how did they end up finding you, and how did you join the team for the opening?
Well, talk about a good segue between MBA and here is one of my former students or I should say just alumni. He's not for former. We work together almost twice a week to this day. But one of the alumni from the first graduating class, he's been kind of he stayed in the industry. He was one of those guys, like I told you, he got the job within 3 or 4 months, and he started this project. So when this project started, it was started by someone who wasn't a brewer. And there was a couple little hiccups and mistakes along the way. So they were like, we need someone who knows a lot about brewing to kind of take this to the next level or the next completion phase. And they were working with a contractor that was doing like the glycol installation and that kind of stuff. So then they hired Fernando to come in and say, okay, from a brewer's vision, what do we need to do? And then the other cool thing is then he ended up sub-hiring another one of my former students from the same class who's also an engineer. Yeah. So the two of them kind of like redesigned the layout and the functionality of the equipment that was already purchased. And then they put that all together. And then, I'm running MBA, and MBA is nights and weekends. So I called Fernando and I said, man, this project sounds amazing. And it sounds crazy because it's the 4th floor of the Brickell City Centre, And I was like, I got to come check it out. And when I came to check it out, he was, he had a lot going on because when you get all the equipment in, there's a lot of work to get everything set up and to get everything kind of ready to receive sugar water. That's pretty much what we do in the beginning, right? And so I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to come by a couple of hours whenever you need me to, and I'm going to just throw some hours at you and just help you passivate tanks and like connect glycol. It's a lot of manual, tedious labor. And so I came in and I was helping him out. And then Fernando's one of the most amazing brewers you're going to meet in South Florida. And he got poached by another brewery that just had just a better overall long-term plan, let's call it. I don't know. It's all apples and oranges at that point. That place is one place isn't better than the other. But so he was getting asked to go to this other brewery, and everything was amicable because we just talked to Bangkok and said, hey, Todd's going to take over what I was doing. I'm going to go over to this other brewery, and then we're just going to make this into win-win-win. Everybody's happy. So I wasn't looking for a full-time gig. I actually was talking to Fernando about coming in and being his part-time assistant because MBA is definitely full-time. But just the way the opportunity came up, I just figured I won't sleep for a couple years and make both things happen. And because brewing is amazing and I love doing this. And MBA is my passion. So I'm making sure that runs as smoothly and all my students are getting everything they can out of it. And until one of those two things doesn't run smoothly, I'm going to be all in on both.
That's kind of amazing. So you've got this established in Thailand already name. You've got this interesting kind of new cuisine. How did you go about developing the beers that you could develop on your own that sort of tied into the S33 sort of brand and concept?
Right. We opened with 4 recipes that came directly from Bangkok. So these are beers. 3 of them are beers that they make on site. And then I think the 4th one was just something that they knew would be a good beer to have for us. And they just wanted to open with those 4. Let's just get those out. Let's make sure on the brewing side that we're getting clean production, that the beers are coming out to the specifications that both of us have agreed to. Once we realized that everything was going fine, they kind of threw it into our court here. What would you like to try next? And as I mentioned, there's a smoker and a wood-fired grill. So immediately that just tells anybody who's making beer, you have to have something dark. You have to have something that's like a little bit sweet and dark in color because that kind of malty sweetness will balance out to the barbecue smoky flavors. And so brown ale, boom. So could have been a brown ale, could have been a porter, could have even been some kind of stout. Brickell Brown has a nice sound to it. and just figured that would be a good way to start that kind of process of getting some beers that go paired directly to what we're making. And then another one is just because there's a pretty big craze, the IPA craze, everybody wants that solid beer. So a session hazy just kind of it was kind of like an obvious choice because we have a pale ale on draft already. That, like I said, that came from Bangkok. And I was like, let's have a session hazy. That kind of balances out because pale ale is very similar to something like Sierra Nevada pale ale. So you've got that little bit of bitterness, very smooth drinking, crystal clear, West Coast style pale ale. And then I was like, oh, let's go session hazy. That way we have something that really pairs up with spicy food. It's kind of like, it's like almost a refreshing thing that you can go wash down almost any of our meals with. And then a sour, because a sour beer is just perfect as like a palate cleanser. And as I had mentioned, like all the different foods here, you can do tapas-style. So let's say you get a papaya salad, then you're like, oh, now I want to get the grilled squid. Well, you have a little bit of this, fruited sour. It's like a palate cleanser. And then you go into the next meal and then boom, you're kind of starting with a fresh, clean palate. And then you can kind of almost have one of those in between. And it's like a 3.4% beer. So it's not like you're not going to get drunk doing this. You're just going to have a nice little pleasant experience. And it's going to help you really enjoy all the different flavors that we have to offer here.
That's kind of amazing. And obviously going back to your days in Colorado and your love for the brown ales, do you have your own brown ale on tap, or is it coming pretty soon?
Oh yeah, no, it's here. That was the first one that we launched. That was kind of like a Miami OG recipe, and it's had a couple iterations. We've kind of changed the recipe a little bit just to kind of it's a first time recipe. So any brewer will tell you make it and then you kind of tweak it based on what the yeast want to do with it, with that kind of brand, and like how our system can work with those ingredients. But it goes so well with like the ribs and with the wings and with the brisket. It's like such a perfect pairing.
That's kind of amazing. I definitely can't wait to try that out. And how has
come on by.
I would love to. How has the response been from the community for the new location?
Oh, from what I've gathered, it's really phenomenal because, first of all, we're just surrounded by these towers that have how many people living right within walking distance or even Metro Mover distance of this place. And so it was really funny because we were under development for years. And so there was this huge sign that covered where we're located that just said, Singa Thai beer or something like that, coming soon. And so for the first 2 months, you have no idea how many people were like, oh my God, we were staring at that sign and we made us so thirsty. We couldn't wait to have a beer, like a local made beer right in our own neighborhood, in our backyard. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed going out and talking with the guests and having a beer with them and just talking about the idea that we are definitely the only brewery in the immediate downtown area. And then definitely the only, place serving beer the way we do, because we don't do kegs or cans or bottles. We go straight from serving vessel right to tap. So we're serving beer from a 10-barrel vessel that goes right to the tap. So it's fresh, it's clean, it's unfiltered. It's just a cool experience, really. When you walk up to the restaurant, you just see the tanks in the windows, and you don't maybe realize that that's how it's coming. But as the brewer, I think it's a really cool setup. It's different from a lot of places you'll find down here.
That's kind of amazing. So you're in Brickell, you're in the heart of Miami with a Thai barbecue fusion sort of restaurant, which of course means that you're the natural people to celebrate Oktoberfest.
Yes, exactly. It goes hand in hand.
Exactly. Which you are actually going to be doing by kicking off the inaugural Miami Beer Week starting on September 20th, which is just a hop, skip, and a jump away from the real Oktoberfest in Germany. But yeah, you're going to be having a big event to kick that off. How did you get started on this particular road, and what's the event going to be like?
We're still young. We opened in January. So we just hit our 6-month kind of area, and we're just like, okay, the beers are coming out great. They're coming out consistent. People are drinking a lot of it. Like that part's going fine. The restaurants we're doing everything we need to do. Now let's do it to the next level. Let's go ahead and start really showcasing off the beers, showcasing off the brewery side of this place a little bit more than just making sure, yes, everything's functioning, So now we're at that level, and the logical thing is Oktoberfest, we're going to make an Oktoberfest beer. Every brewery is going to do something special for that time of year, even if they're just going to make some kind of German lager and just put an Oktoberfest twist to it. And then we're just talking with, one of our main managers here. We're just like, let's take it up a notch and actually let's bring some other brewers in and kind of showcase some of these German style beers and diversify what they bring. So I'll be making a more traditional fest beer, which is the style of beer you would drink at Oktoberfest. In this country, when we drink an Oktoberfest, we're really probably drinking a Märzen, or we call it a Marzen, which is, you might find this like a Gordon Biersch or something, made this beer famous here, which is a little bit more of an amber, an amber lager. But an Oktoberfest proper is like a golden lager with maybe like 6% alcohol. So that's what I'm going to shoot for. And then I'm just inviting other breweries that I know make solid German style beers, which is again, I'm not going to say anything easier or more difficult to make, but just brewers that I know make that style really, really well and traditional. And try to diversify a little bit. So there's like a Schwartz beer style, which is a black lager, which is perfect. Then an actual Märzen, like I said, like this amber style Oktoberfest. And then we're just going to alternate with a couple food tents and a couple of beer tents with some local community brewers also that'll come in and pour with us. And then we're going to continue to just pour their beer. We're going to buy all the beer from them and just continue to serve it on our draft system here through the entire Oktoberfest time. Because as you mentioned, it's in September, so it throws a lot of people off. So September 18th is the official Munich start of Oktoberfest, and it goes into the beginning of October. So we'll be able to have a lot of these styles of beers, and hopefully we'll have some bratwurst. Since we have the grill, we can do some beer and a brat kind of combinations and do that for the entire Oktoberfest, Miami Beer Week, etc.
All of that sounds absolutely amazing, and I'm hoping that we will get more details as we get closer to the event, including who's going to be coming by and so on. So thank you so much for your time. I do appreciate it, and I need to get to Brickell as soon as I possibly can.
All right. Thanks, David. You're invited, and when you get here, first round's on me, of course, and I can't wait to meet you face-to-face.
Thank you.
It definitely makes me want a brown ale. I think I may have to open one up here in a few minutes, and I definitely need to get to Brickell. I am very excited because the food looks incredible, the beer looks incredible, and maybe I take some more classes after the conversation. You never know. Thank you for coming out. We do appreciate you listening to the Florida Beer Podcast. Next week, we are probably going to be doing some live interviews out in the field. As for who that's going to be, I will let you know a little bit later. Thank you so much for listening, and drink Florida Craft.